Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Thursday, March the 23rd. There is no ahagger10 on the Twitter handle today as he's enjoying a nice day with his beloved for our birthday. So instead, it's myself and TCW news writer Aiden McDonald with you. How's Strix, Aiden? You good?
Yeah, I'm good, Sean. How are you?
Aye, not bad. Usual. Freezing, Aiden, freezing. Now, before we get going, a quick reminder that we've got a new subscription deal on the go, which is £1 for 3 months. So get on that. And also, the link to that's in the comments. And also, while we're at it, we thank SENECA, who sponsor the Celtic Way morning briefing. Now, SENECA are the #1 hair transplant company in Europe and offer innovative hair restoration treatments. And you can find out more about them via the links in the description of this video. Now, the second part of the headline here is Q&A. So by all means, fire in your questions and we'll take as many as we can. But for me, there is only one place I think you can start the day, Aidan, and that's with Mikey Johnston. Now, the 23-year-old is on loan at Portuguese side Vitória from Celtic for the season. And last night, he made his Republic of Ireland international debut as a substitute in a 3-2 win over Latvia. He won a lot of fans last night, Aidan, with his dribbling, and it was a shot off the post that fell to Rotherham forward, Chidozie Ogbene for the winner. So that impressive 31-minute cameo leads me to the question, and it leads a lot of people on Twitter, if I'm gauging it right, to the question: does he have a future at Celtic when he returns? Now, his contract ends in 2025, Aidan, so I suppose the answer is technically yes in any case. But in terms of realistic prospects, what's your thoughts?
I definitely don't think he's done his sort of future prospects at Celtic any harm after last night's performance. It was obviously an instant impact, like you say, off the bench. He was involved in the goal, and then he had a bit of a mazy run later on when he beat sort of 2 or 3 players. It would have been a wonder goal if it went in. So it was really good to see Mikey Johnston doing that, because that's what we hoped kind of we would see more of when he first kind of broke onto the team under Brendan Rodgers. We'd seen sort of wee glimpses of him going on runs, beating players looking dangerous in the box. So it was really positive to see him doing that, and it looks like for now anyway that he made a good decision, sort of switching from Scotland to Ireland, because I think it was probably going to be quite hard for him to get in the Scotland squad given his sort of situation with not really playing at Celtic. So it looks like a good move for him at the moment.
I put up, thank you very much for all your comments there, wishing us good morning. There's a few about Mikey Johnston on there, and I'm going to throw a couple up now. Tim on straight to the point. Aidan says he doesn't think he's got a future at Celtic and they should sell him in the summer. Robert Davies says, hello lads from Dublin. He had his dancing boots on last night when he came on and he did very well, which seems to be the general consensus. As I say, it was only a 31-minute cameo. Paul Byrne comes in saying he thinks it's time to cut the cord with Mikey Johnston. In Paul's opinion, he doesn't offer anything that Celtic don't already have, and he would be way down the pecking order. Ultimately, that means he would just be a bench warmer picking up wages. And Peter Duffy says, great talent, but unlucky with injuries and not really suited for the packed defences and hammer throwers of the SPFL. He says it's sad, but can't see him holding down a jersey. Now, in terms of how he's getting on at Vitória, Aidan, he's recently passed the 1,000 minutes played mark, and the club itself is actually doing really well, sitting 5th in the hunt for European football. So in that sense, it's going well. But what I would say as a qualifier is that he's been used as a sub just as regularly as he has a starter, and his tangible impact stands at a goal and 2 assists in the league and a couple of goals in an early cup round against a third-tier side. So I suppose what I'm saying is, and I'll put up a comment from Beach Boys that's essentially saying this, is the worry that the same perceived drawbacks in terms of maybe poor decision making, maybe not enough direct contributions, are those still going to be prevalent when he returns in the summer?
I would hope not, but maybe based off the sort of stats that you've listed there, that could be the case. Obviously, as we're sort of getting into the season as well, or getting near the end of the season in a lot of countries, 22 appearances probably isn't as much as it seemed sort of before the World Cup break. Whatever number he was on before that, I can't remember exactly, but I think some people's frustration was with Mikey Johnston that maybe at times he could be a wee bit greedy with the ball, not release it quick enough, or his decision making sometimes wasn't the best. So it was based off last night. It seemed to be something that didn't look like a problem, but I understand that's a very small sample size. You can't just change your sort of whole views on a player based off, as you said, a 31-minute appearance. But I like to think that he does kind of have a future at Celtic. I mean, as you mentioned, obviously, earlier, the fact that he penned a contract extension before he even made the move to Portugal he must be in Ange's plans to an extent, or it's at the very least somebody that Ange does like and wants to consider having in the team in the future. So I think I was probably hoping he would have played a wee bit more in Portugal, to be honest, Sean, but there's obviously still some games between now and the end of the season, so fingers crossed these cameos with Ireland. They're obviously also playing France in the start of their Euro 2024 qualifying campaign, so if he was to put in a good showing there, that's also like a level up in terms of the opposition. Then I think hopefully that would be a good sort of benchmark for him between now and the end of the season.
Plenty of comments I was flicking up there. Divided a wee bit, probably most on the side of he's probably not going to be getting a game if he comes back. What I will say is Beach Boys come back in after the big comment that I put up saying that he would personally keep Mikey Johnston if Abada wants to, Lael Abada wants to go, because it could save on a replacement, plus keep whatever money you get for Abada in the bank for, or to use in other areas of the squad. It is one of those ones, right? You add the Lael Abada situation into Aiden, and if he goes, then yes, technically that's one fewer winger in the way of Mikey Johnston getting some game time. But it's Jota, Daizen Maeda, Sead Haksabanovic, even James Forrest is still floating about. So what I would ask is, Johnston's just going to be in the same predicament as youngsters like Rocco Vata, except Johnston's 23 about to turn 24 rather than 17 about to turn 18.
Yeah, I mean, when you list all the names off like that, even if Abada does move on, it kind of shows you the strength of the squad. And it's going to be difficult for Mikey Johnston to break in, even if he was sort of putting up really good numbers in Portugal. You know, he played 35 plus games or whatever. It's still going to be hard for him to break in. I think on the point of the James Forrest, sorry, just when you touched on him there, I know he's kind of struggling a wee bit with injuries, and I know he also got that hat-trick against Hibs, but he's not been involved a lot this season. I do wonder if maybe Mikey Johnston could maybe potentially take his place, where that would lead to Forrest leaving or sort of dropping further down the pecking order. I don't know exactly, but I understand Forrest does as usual on the right wing, Johnston can be in the left, but we've also seen Forrest on the left as well over the years. It is going to be difficult for Mikey Johnston to break in, there's no doubt about that, but I don't know. I'm probably being a bit overwhelmed by that cameo last night, but I just feel that sort of it's made me think, oh, maybe he does have a future at Celtic.
Again, I'm flicking up a few comments. Tim Arnaud's definitely in the camp of he's not going to get a game, so what's the point essentially? Peter Duffy even comes in and saying that Forrest needs to move on as well. He hopes it strengthens other SPFL teams. I'm not sure a lot of people would have that in their mind, Aidan. But yeah, it's Charlie McGarvey's one's an interesting one. He thinks that contract extension that you mentioned is primarily to get some sort of transfer fee for Mikey Johnston, whether it would be a team like Victoria abroad or whether it would be another Scottish team. Do you put some credence in that maybe the contract extension wasn't necessarily a show of faith that is in Ange's plans, but more a kind of safeguard that if he does really well, then he can come back and get a chance. But if he does well enough to have a shooter, but not quite well enough to be in the plans, then they can sell him with the knowledge that they've got him tied in for another couple of years.
Yeah, that's probably a good point, to be fair, and that could be something that was playing into sort of Ange / the recruitment models thinking when they were putting pen to paper on that deal. They might think of that if he does, he goes away and performs in arguably probably a stronger league than the SPFL in terms of the Portuguese division, that maybe that would then allow him to get a fee for him. I would hope that isn't the case, but it's probably is something worth considering, like you're saying, because like the comment I was saying, sorry, that could be something. I think the sort of people mentioned Rocco Vata, maybe him getting a chance, I can understand that argument as well. Obviously, he is considerably younger than Mikey Johnston. He's 17, Rocco Vata? 17,
he'll turn 18 in a couple of weeks, and Mikey Johnston is 23, about to turn 24 in a couple of weeks. So, but again, I would always, and I know this is kind of, it seems like an excuse for Mikey Johnston a lot of the time when I say it, but it is still true that when you have the injury problems that he has had, you're almost not the age that you actually are in terms of football terms, in terms of football years. How much credence you put in that is up to yourself, I suppose. But I would always make the argument, if your development at those ages is interrupted, then although you might be about to turn 24, in actual football terms, you're probably closer to 20. Might be an excuse for him. I'll admit it. It might be an excuse for him. But Raymond Marshall says he's worth another season. Michael Ross comes in, kind of alluding to what you said there, Aidan. He says he would rather let Rocco Vata get a chance. Is that kind of another way to look at it, that if he does come back, I'm saying that if say Liel Abada left, that there would be one fewer person in, one fewer winger in Mikey Johnston's way. But if Mikey Johnston comes back and you kind of feel obliged to give him a shot, is that just yet another player in Rocco Vata's way? Is that the way people should be looking at it, really?
Yeah, it's a point of view people can understandably take, and the fact is, Ange obviously mentioned sort of, I think it was one of the pressers near the end of last year, that he is hoping in the next 6 to 12 months to give more of the B team players not like a full-on run in the first team, but get them involved a bit more. And if that is his thinking, somebody like Rocco Vata, you would have to imagine near the top of that, given he's already made his debut for Celtic. Also a good contributor at kind of international youth levels and for the B team. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt if Mikey Johnston was to come in and be playing regularly, even if Abada does move on, that is somebody else that's in front of Vata and players like that. So yeah, I can understand, because there's a lot of excitement about Vata, that people might think that's another reason that Mikey Johnston should maybe move on.
Brown Warrior saying he's stayed injury-free in Portugal. He's had a couple of knocks, Aidan, for what I remember, but not like a serious one. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there was a few wee knocks here and there, but it was nothing like the sort of injuries he had that was keeping him out for. I know obviously got that one in the season that was eventually stopped by COVID up at St Johnstone. Then he was out for, I think it was about 12 months or something like that. So it was nothing like that, obviously, but I think there was a few wee niggles here and
there. Beach Boys coming in saying that's a great point that I made about the not necessarily what age you are, because he says he's 47 and his physio says he's got the body of an 87-year-old because of his injuries. He's only, I don't actually think he's kidding on Aidan, because Beach Boys was a footballer himself, so maybe not quite 87, but not far off it. Maybe if he's had picked up a fair few over the years. Mahash coming in, kind of bringing a wee bit of sanity maybe to the proceedings, saying Celtic just need to give themselves a chance to find out if the loan spell has worked in their favour with Mikey Johnston. Is that the kind of thing that you can see them already knowing before he comes back, Aidan, or is it one of those things that you need to wait and see what it comes back like? His attitude, his physical, his physique, he's kind of, could he handle the intensity? I saw Tim Anon commenting that the intensity is something he maybe couldn't cope with on a regular basis. Is it something you need to wait and see when he comes back, or given they will be watching him, will they already know by the time his loan spell's up?
I mean, I'd imagine they probably, if they have been watching him, they will maybe have an idea. I think probably how many appearances he ends up finishing on between now and the end of the season could play a part in how they would view that as well. I mean, say, this is probably unlikely, but say like he didn't play another game between now and the end of the season, I think overall they would probably deem the loan spell as maybe not being the biggest success. Regardless, even if he was putting up really good numbers, if he ends the season having only played 22 games, then it's probably not going to be viewed as him sort of building himself up. If he has a strong end to the season, then it obviously works the opposite way. I think probably Celtic will wait fully till he's back to make a final judgment, but I'd imagine they'll already be sort of developing an opinion on that, if not maybe already made their minds up privately.
Tim and on back in saying it needs to be ruthless this summer, as I think everybody said last summer as well. Everyone who's not at the level Ange Postecoglou wants has to be moved on. It's nothing personal, only business. I think most people would agree with that, Aidan. The squad that's been built at the moment in the last 3-4 transfer windows is formidable, and we'll come on to that in more detail in a minute. But I think Tim and on's probably correct, isn't he? That every transfer window probably now, but it's this summer in particular, if there's clearly players that aren't going to feature or are only going to feature if there's a massive injury crisis, then they probably do need to be moved on.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty, without sounding too harsh, deadwood at Celtic that probably should, or will hopefully be moved out the door over the next sort of 12 months. I know Mikey Johnston doesn't fall into this camp, but there's obviously quite a few players whose contracts are going to be sort of, they only have a year left come this summer. So, if they're not going to sign a new deal, they'll need to be moved on if Celtic want to sort of get any sort of fee for them. So I think there will be players that do leave the club. There's obviously been a clean out since Andrews came in, really across a few transfer windows. A lot of players have left, but because there was so many sort of guys that just weren't really contributing that much, there's still other individuals that need to be moved on. I wouldn't personally include Mikey Johnston in that sort of group, but I'd probably be more leaning towards somebody like Barkas, Soro, Ayeti, which I know I'm not saying anything new there. People have probably been thinking that for at least 18 months, if not longer. But I don't know if I'd personally include Mikey Johnston in that, but we'd Celtic definitely need to get some more players off the wage bill.
Those three are part of the kind of contingent that expire next summer, I believe. Yeah. The kind of more notable names in there are probably Joe Hart and David Turnbull.
Yeah. In terms of players you maybe want to look to keep. Yeah.
I'm still very intrigued by the David Turnbull situation. I'm not going to lie. I obviously was wrong in my prediction that a new deal for him would be tied up before the new year, but very, very, very intrigued by what happens with that. In terms of squads, Aidan, rather than that, and moving on from future prospects, I suppose, to talk about the past. And Mikael Lustig was asked about comparisons between this current Celtic team under Ange Postecoglou and the Brendan Rodgers Invincible side, which he was obviously a part of. Now, to actually quote him, what he said was, it's hard to say in terms of which one's better. He said the current squad are doing so well, but you can absolutely compare them with the Brendan Rodgers team due to the way that they play. He said the strength with his team, the Brendan Rodgers team, is the same as with this one, in that it doesn't matter what players are in the starting 11, they're all going to perform really well. And you're always quite comfortable when you watch them. You were never quite nervous that they're going to slip up because you know they'll push on. What do you make of that, Aidan?
I think it is. That's a sort of interesting discussion, isn't it? I know we've talked about it before, sort of on air and off air, comparing the two teams. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think sometimes there can always be sort of recency bias in terms of who you think's the best. I mean, we've discussed previously how it feels like the sort of Celtic Player of the Year changes every other week based off, you know, who scored a few goals or who got assists. So you can maybe apply it when it comes to teams as well. I've said before that I prefer sort of Ange's style of play to Brendan Rodgers' style of play, while also acknowledging that Rodgers was extremely successful. I think in terms of Lustig's comments, he is probably right, and it's quite a balanced view that is quite hard to say. If we're maybe even comparing like individual seasons, sort of like the obviously the Invincible season and then maybe even this campaign, obviously probably would be a better thing to maybe compare come the end of the campaign if Celtic do potentially clinch a treble, which we obviously hope for, along with if they were to, you know, win 8 out of the last 9 games and pick up a draw or win all the remaining matches to beat the points tally. I know obviously you yourself did the piece last week, Sean, talking about how Celtic aren't, as it says, in a title race with Rangers. It's more in a title race with themselves. So I think if Celtic were to sort of start beating the stats from the Invincible season, then I think there would be a very, very serious argument that that maybe is a better team. And there's also maybe without going into it too much, because also we had a Celtic podcast, there's maybe the argument about coming up against a bit of a stronger Rangers team. It is one that has been winning stuff in recent years, you know. Not a lot, but they have been winning some stuff. And compared to when Celtic were playing a team that had just newly been promoted at the time. So I think that plays in that part as well, to be honest.
Brown Warrior saying, kind of alluding to what you said, the Invincibles had little or no competition. Potentially, I think you've got to take into consideration that kind of stuff, but nonetheless, to go unbeaten for a full domestic season is remarkable regardless. You're right, when I wrote that piece, I've obviously got an interest in this because I want to see them doing it just for the fact that you like to see history being made, but apart from anything else, I need to say what I'm about to say because I obviously wrote that newsletter that you mentioned. Basically, again, as you said, saying that this team are in a title race, just not with Rangers. It's with the Invincible season's points record and goals tally, and obviously trying to match the treble. They can't go unbeaten because of that St Mirren game, obviously. But I point out in that piece that I wrote it before the Hibs game, so it was if they won all 10, they would break Red Star Belgrade's world record for points in a 38-game season. And if they won 9 and drew 1, both of which, by the way, I think are very possible. Winning all 10 was possible. Winning 9 and drawn 1 was possible. Now that's obviously winning all 9 or winning 8 and drawn 1. If they do that, then they beat the Invincibles points record. So I think it's doable. They're currently averaging more goals per game than the Invincibles team did, so they could end up with 120 league goals, or even maybe more than that. So I think it's possible. I do genuinely think it's possible. And once you get that, you need to wait till the end of the season to see it, obviously. But if you end up with a treble and you end up tallying up all those kind of things, apart and the only thing that you don't touch is that you get beat once, then it comes down to the kind of points tally, goals per game, style of play. And I think maybe this Ange Postecoglou team ticks all those boxes for that. What I will say is, to go back to Lustig's comments, I found what he says about the strength with his team being the same as his strength with this one in terms of overall depth, I actually think I'd give the edge in that department to this team as well, Aidan, because there's also, you've got to consider the 5 subs rule, which I think really, it benefits this team, but it benefits this team because it reinforces just how strong Ange Postecoglou has built this squad to be. There are no passengers on a bench, really. I've said before at the start of this season, when the kind of squad was taking shape in terms of depth, that the competition to be on the bench was almost as strong as the competition to be in the starting 11. And I think that's probably been the case for a lot of this season when everybody's been available, because there's always got to be a good player sacrificed in that sense. For instance, you take the Hearts Cup game recently, Aidan, right, 9 on the bench, and obviously he uses all 5 every game basically. But the 5 that he used were Iwata, Kobayashi, O'Reilly, and Abada. All 5 of them players, right? But the 4 that he didn't use, it's not as if it was always going to be those 5, because the 4 that he didn't use were Anthony Ralston, who's been brilliant when he's played this year, this season. Alessandro Bernabe, who's an almost 4 million player. David Turnbull, whatever you think of his starting prospects, a really talented and productive player. And then, all right, Scott Bain, who is probably the exception that proves the rule that I'm talking about. So I don't think the Invincible squad really had that much depth. Aidan, really good squad, but I don't think it was ever quite at that level.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably like a very, very strong starting 11, then maybe 1 or 2 subs. Obviously, at that time, even thinking like in the sort of striking department, you had Dembele, who was phenomenal. Then Griffiths was just coming off that 40-goal season, so that was also a very strong forward line. Scott Sinclair also played through the middle, but I would agree. I mean, if 5 subs had been a rule back in the 2016-17 season, I think you would have found maybe after 2 subs that the remaining other 3 were sort of bit part players, maybe young players. Somebody like who, I'm not trying to slaughter him when I say this, but somebody like maybe like Liam Henderson coming on as a sub, who I think was a good player, obviously, very good player for Hibs. He's playing over in Italy now, but probably was never going to be at that level, and I would say probably isn't at the level of really any of Celtic's starting midfielders right now. That'd be the sort of player you are bringing off the bench, because he was also back at the club for that season.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the 5 subs rule. So I think in terms of depth, you make a good point there. I would give the edge to Andrew's team as well.
Plenty of comments coming in again. A lot about the kind of Invincible side maybe not having the same level of competition. But I'm going to put this up by Brown Warrior, because I see this kind of coming up every few weeks maybe on Twitter, which as always is not a particularly great gauge of what the wider support think, I don't think. But Brown Warrior says Martin and Aidan's team beats both. For me, you know where I stand, and I agree with that. I just think you obviously you need to make allowances for maybe advances in sports science, advances in off the pitch kind of habits and attitudes and stuff and fitness. But ultimately for me, the individual players in Martin and Aidan's team, and even the collective, how well they've done in Europe and different things, they're the best team I've seen in my lifetime anyway. I don't know what you think. You maybe have a wee bias towards the Invincibles, but I think I'm probably in Brown Warriors camp.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a bias towards obviously the Invincibles, but I would agree with you, because I mean that Martin and Aidan's team would probably beat both the sides, because if we're having it on an even playing field and there was some sort of scenario in which they could both take each other on at sort of maximum capacity, you would imagine you would have to apply then that Martin and Aidan's team would have the sort of, you know, current sports science elements involved in that, etc., you know, diet and that, so tactical things as well. So if we were doing it in a sort of even keel, I think the big thing is, like you say, Europe. Martin and Aidan's side also did really well in Europe, you know, UEFA Cup final, also competed in the Champions League, you know, beating teams like Juventus, etc. in the group stages. This Ange team hasn't really sort of, they've not, I don't want to say not turned up in Europe, that's maybe a bit harsh, but they've struggled a wee bit in Europe. I think we all agreed the Champions League this season was disappointing, but there was positives there. If Ange was to go and have if Celtic win the league and Ange's team was to go and have a good performance in the Champions League next year, then maybe, I still don't think you could put that above O'Neill's team, because obviously getting to a Europa League finals, a UEFA Cup final, I should say, is a slip there, is a phenomenal achievement, obviously. I think until Ange's team do a bit better in Europe is probably before you could start comparing, because the Invincibles team struggled a bit in Europe as well, didn't they? I mean, the Champions League campaigns, obviously they got the draws with Man City, Mönchengladbach and that, but sort of end up finishing bottom that first year, and then I think it was third the following year, wasn't it? So yeah, I would put Martin and Aidan's team above both of them as well, Sean.
I knew that if I put that comment up, people would start commenting, but it's if nothing else, it's personal preference. It's a pub style debate with the differences in the game and all that. But for me, I just come back to whether this squad probably has more depth to it. But I just think the Martin and Aidan team was far better individually, and I would argue style of football, yes, maybe as Postecoglou's team played more attractive, but I still think people bash the Martin and Aidan team because of the amount of physical players they had. I think they played some really good football. After all, you had Henrik Larsson in the team.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't
it? Michael Ross came in saying simply that again that winning football is always better football. Scott McGill agrees with me. Kaiser comes in saying Martin and Aidan's side had better players, but this side played a better football. There's a couple of comments saying that the kind of the squad depth would mean that this team would outlast Martin and Aidan's team. That's not really what I mean. We're not really here to talk about that, but I still like doing it because I see it every few weeks on Twitter that it comes up saying, "Oh, this is better than the Martin and Aidan team," and different things. I think both teams contained a lot of winners, is what I would say to be diplomatic. So, aye. Anything else to bring up, Aidan? There's plenty of comments coming in still about this, saying it's different arguments and all that, but anything else that's not related to comparing Martin and Aidan's team to the Invincibles? Or anything more about Lustig's comments?
I thought there was also like Lustig's comments sort of praising Callum McGregor were sort of maybe worth just touching on. I mean, it's not a surprise. Obviously, they played together. But I know he probably rates him highly, but he was saying that he's been a sort of really good sort of successor to Scott Brown. You know, it was obviously big shoes to fill, but he was very he was praising McGregor very highly, and that was obviously good to hear because that's somebody who Lustig was in the team when obviously McGregor was just breaking in as a youngster. So he's seen that gradual progression right up to when Lustig moved on in 2019. So he's seen him from maybe, I mean, at the start of the Invincible season, Cal McGregor wasn't involved that much. It was more the sort of kind of end of the sort of just before the winter break into the second half that he sort of really kicked on. And Lustig was somebody there that was able to sort of see that progression. I thought that was quite interesting, his comments on that, Sean, to be honest.
To be fair, McGregor played, I think, like 40 odd games in that Invincible season.
No, he did play a lot, but I remember he scored a goal against Hearts, and it was kind of around about Christmas time or that, and that was when he started to break in. It may have been just before that, to be fair, because 40 games obviously would say he was playing quite a lot. But yeah, I thought Lustig's comments were interesting because he's somebody that's seen him grow as a player, to be honest.
There's still a wee debate about the Martin and Aidan things. There's plenty of comments coming in, just saying about imagine Larsson, Sutton and Hartson up against Greg Taylor at the back post and different things like that, which I think is a fair comment. But Alan Wood saying he'd still bet on Larsson to score a last minute winner. You've got to remember he's 51 now, Aidan, but he probably would. Right, I think unless you've got any further questions, I think we might call it there for the day. Aidan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that sounds good.
And an interesting one. I know I get dragged into the Martin and Aidan stuff again there, but you know where I stand on that, so it'll be nobody's surprise. But I think we'll call it there. Been a grand half hour or so, and we thank you all for your comments, your questions, and everything else in between that we read out and some that we didn't. As I said at the start, remember we have a £1 for 3 months deal to subscribe to the website on the go. You get access to everything on there, all the exclusive content. Because we're more than just this. Every morning we do a lot of written stuff. It's the fact this is only a small part of it, isn't it, Aidan? The link to that will be in the comments and the description as well. And we thank SENECA, as I said earlier on, #1 hair restoration treatment in Europe. Thank them for their sponsorship. And I thank you, Aidan, for your contribution. And we shall see you all tomorrow. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.